As Linda walked through the lobby, she saw a man in a wheelchair waiting near the reception desk. He was a black man, dressed in a sharp suit, with a kind smile on his face. But Linda didn't smile back. "Excuse me," Linda said, crossing her arms. "Are you lost? This is a professional office, not a charity." The man raised an eyebrow but kept his calm. "I am not lost. I'm here for an important meeting." Linda rolled her eyes. "Listen, I don't know who you think you are, but we don't have time for random people off the street. If you're looking for a handout, you're in the wrong place." The receptionist gasped softly but didn't say anything. The man in the wheelchair looked at Linda carefully, then said, "I think you should check your calendar." Linda frowned. She hated being told what to do. "I don't need to check anything. I run HR here. I know everyone important in this company, and you're definitely not on the list." The man simply smiled and leaned back in his wheelchair. "All right, if you say so." Just then, the elevator doors opened and the company's senior staff rushed out. They spotted the man in the wheelchair and immediately hurried over. "Mr. Harris," one of them said, smiling nervously, "we're so glad you're here. Let me show you to the conference room." Linda froze, her face turning bright red. "Mr. Harris?" she stammered, looking back at the man she had just insulted. Jonathan Harris didn't say anything at first. He turned to the staff and said, "I'll be there in a moment." He looked back at Linda, his expression calm but serious. "It seems we need to have a conversation about respect, Ms. Barker." Linda's mouth opened, but no words came out. Jonathan Harris gestured for Linda to follow him. He wheeled himself into a quiet corner of the lobby, away from the curious eyes of the staff. Linda reluctantly followed, her heart pounding in her chest. Once they were alone, Jonathan folded his hands in his lap and looked up at her. "Ms. Barker," he began, his voice calm but firm, "do you often speak to visitors that way?" Linda shook her head quickly. "No, Mr. Harris, I didn't realize who you were. If I had known..." Jonathan held up a hand to stop her. "That's the problem, isn't it? You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me or anyone else with respect." Linda's face turned even redder. She opened her mouth to respond, but no excuse seemed good enough. Jonathan continued, "As the head of HR, you're responsible for ensuring that this company is a welcoming and inclusive place for everyone. Yet I've just experienced the opposite from you. Do you understand how serious this is?" Linda nodded silently, her eyes glued to the floor. Jonathan sighed and leaned back slightly. "I wasn't planning on starting my visit like this, but now I see there's work to be done. I want a full report on your department's hiring practices, training programs, and how you handle complaints about discrimination. You'll have it on my desk by the end of the week." Linda's eyes widened. "Of course, Mr. Harris. I'll get right on it." Before Jonathan could say more, the receptionist cautiously approached. "Mr. Harris," she said politely, "the team is ready for you in the boardroom." "Thank you," Jonathan replied with a nod. He turned back to Linda. "I suggest you think about what happened here today, Ms. Barker. Actions have consequences." With that, Jonathan wheeled himself away, leaving Linda standing there, her mind racing. As she watched him disappear into the elevator, Linda couldn't help but wonder if her job was at risk. But more than that, for the first time in a long time, she began to question her own behavior. Linda stood frozen in place for a moment, trying to collect her thoughts. The words, "actions have consequences," echoed in her mind. She glanced around the lobby, noticing the receptionist quickly looking away, pretending to be busy. Linda felt the weight of her actions sink in. She returned to her office and shut the door. Sitting at her desk, she opened her laptop to begin the report Jonathan had demanded. As she started typing, she realized just how little attention she had paid to the company's diversity and inclusion policies. She'd always thought those meetings and trainings were just formalities. Now she wasn't so sure. Linda leaned back in her chair and sighed. "How did I let this happen?" she muttered to herself. She felt uneasy, not just because her job might be on the line, but because a part of her knew Jonathan was right. Meanwhile, in the boardroom, Jonathan was greeting the senior team. They were eager to impress him, showing charts, projections, and plans for the company's future. But Jonathan's mind kept drifting back to his encounter with Linda. He interrupted the presentation. "Before we move forward, I need to address something," he said, his voice calm but commanding. The room fell silent. The senior managers exchanged nervous glances. "This company has grown tremendously, and I'm proud of what we've achieved," Jonathan began. "But growth isn't just about profits and market share. It's about people. Every single person who works here, from the janitor to the executive team, deserves respect and fair treatment." He paused, letting his words sink in. "Today, I experienced something that made me question whether we're truly living up to our values. I want every manager here to evaluate how their teams are being treated. And I want solutions, real, actionable solutions, to ensure Walker Tech is a place where everyone feels valued." The managers nodded, some scribbling notes furiously. Jonathan's tone made it clear he wasn't asking. He was demanding change. Back in her office, Linda was scrolling through old HR files, her stomach twisting in knots. The more she read, the more she realized how many complaints she had dismissed over the years, people who had felt ignored, disrespected, or discriminated against. A knock at her door startled her. It was the receptionist carrying a tray with coffee. "I thought you might need this," the receptionist said, her voice soft. Linda managed a weak smile. "Thank you." She hesitated, then added, "I'm sorry about earlier." "You heard what I said to Mr. Harris, didn't you?" The receptionist nodded slowly. "I did. And if I'm honest, it's not the first time I've seen something like that from you." Linda's chest tightened. "I didn't realize I was like that." The receptionist set the tray down. "People notice, but maybe now's your chance to change." Linda stared at the steaming cup of coffee, her mind swirling with thoughts. Linda sat quietly in her office after the receptionist left, her thoughts racing. She had always seen herself as efficient and professional, but now she couldn't escape the harsh truth. Her actions had hurt others. She spent the rest of the day going through files and writing the report Jonathan had requested. As she worked, she felt something unfamiliar, a determination to do better. She researched inclusive HR practices and even drafted ideas for new training programs. The next morning, Linda stood outside the CEO's office, clutching her report nervously. Jonathan's assistant waved her in, and she found him seated at his desk reviewing some papers. "Ms. Barker," Jonathan said, looking up, his expression neutral. "Come in." Linda handed him the report. "Here's what you asked for, Mr. Harris. I've included everything, along with some suggestions for improvement." Jonathan took the file and flipped through it. "Thank you. Sit down." Linda sat across from him, feeling small but determined. "I've read through your history with the company," Jonathan said. "You've been here a long time, and your performance metrics are strong. But what happened yesterday is unacceptable. It doesn't align with who we are or who we should be." Linda nodded, swallowing hard. "I understand, and I want to make amends. I've started working on a diversity and inclusion initiative, and I'd like your input." Jonathan raised an eyebrow. "Go on." Linda explained her ideas: mandatory training for all employees, an anonymous feedback system to report discrimination, and a mentorship program to support underrepresented groups within the company. Jonathan listened carefully. When she finished, he leaned back in his wheelchair and studied her. "It's a good start," he said finally, "but change doesn't happen overnight. It takes commitment." "I'm ready to commit," Linda said, her voice steady. "I know I've made mistakes, but I want to fix them." Jonathan nodded slowly. "All right, I'll give you the chance to prove it, but I'll be watching closely." Linda felt a wave of relief and determination. "Thank you, Mr. Harris. I won't let you down." Over the next few months, Linda worked harder than she ever had. She implemented the new programs, sought feedback from employees, and made sure her actions reflected the values she wanted to promote. Jonathan noticed the changes. Employees began to speak more openly about their experiences, and the company's culture started to shift. Linda, once feared for her strictness, became known for her fairness and dedication. One day, as Linda passed Jonathan in the hallway, he smiled at her. "Good job, Ms. Barker," he said simply. Linda smiled back. She knew there was still work to do, but for the first time in a long time, she felt proud of the direction she was heading. Thank you for watching till the end. I hope you enjoyed the story. If you did, don't hesitate to like the video and share it with your friends too. Subscribe to our channel and turn on the notification bell for more fascinating stories. Have a nice day.